Margaret Mifamwoy Joseph often heard admirers compare her to a green-eyed goddess. Van, as she was called by everyone, had fine features, rich chestnut hair, and a warm smile. When her future husband, Mortimer Herbert Morris Goodall, saw her one evening near his London apartment, he fell off the stairs just to get her attention. Mortimer was blue-eyed, blonde, tall, and handsome. He and Van quickly became friends, and eventually they married. Though they got along well, the two were sort of a mismatched pair. Van was quiet and somewhat solitary, and dreamed of being a writer some day. Mortimer, on the other hand, had a passion for machines and technology, especially fast cars. He drove an Aston Martin racer and lived what Van described as a whirly kind of life. Van did not share her husband's love for race cars, though she supported Mortimer as he tried to build a career as a race car driver. In 1933, he was asked to join the team of Aston Martins in the Le Mans Grand Prix d'Endurance, one of the sport's most grueling races. Drivers were expected to race as many laps as they could in 24 hours, from 4 o'clock one afternoon to the same time the next day. Mortimer did well enough in that race to join the Aston Martin team, kicking off his professional race car driving career. The couple must have celebrated Mortimer's good fortune. Approximately 9 months later, on April 3rd, 1934, at around 11:30 at night, the Morris Goodalls welcomed their first child into the world. The baby, a girl, was named Valerie-Jane. It was clear from an early age that Valerie-Jane had a particular affinity for animals. For her first birthday, Mortimer bought his daughter a special toy, a lifelike, child-sized stuffed chimpanzee named Jubilee, in honour of a baby chimp that had been born at the London Zoo. The toy had shining button eyes, soft dark brown fur, and a white downy chin. It played music when its tummy was squeezed. Several friends warned Mortimer and Van that Valerie-Jane would surely be frightened by a toy so lifelike. But Valerie-Jane loved Jubilee so much that she toted it everywhere and put it in cast-off dresses. Later, her family would remember Valerie-Jane's love for Jubilee as a sign of things to come. After Valerie-Jane was born, the Morris Goodalls' family life became more tense. Mortimer proved to be a better race car driver than he was a husband and father. He was careless with money, and bills often went unpaid. Mortimer worked much of the day at his engineering job, and often saw his daughter only when she was sleeping. This added to the growing distance between him and his daughter. In fact, his contribution to Valerie-Jane's life came mostly in the things she had inherited from him at birth: good health, high energy, a sense of competitiveness, and a willingness to take risks. Almost everything else about Valerie-Jane could be credited to Van. Van, together with the family's nanny, Nancy Sowden, was responsible for Valerie-Jane's everyday life. Van believed in raising children with love and reasoned discipline, and she taught Valerie-Jane to appreciate the natural world and the quiet pleasures that it could provide. As Valerie-Jane grew, Jubilee continued to be a regular companion, but the little girl's interest in animals had plenty of opportunities to flourish. The garden of the house was a new frontier full of friends, and Valerie-Jane enjoyed the company of flowers, birds, insects, a pet tortoise named Johnny Walker, a dog named Peggy, and the many other animals she discovered. When she was 18 months old, Valerie-Jane dug up a handful of earthworms. She took them home and carried them into her bed, despite Nanny Sowden's disgust. When her mother checked on Valerie-Jane, the toddler was lying happily side by side with the worms. At that point, Van gently told Valerie-Jane that the worms would die away from the earth. The little girl sighed and hurried back to the garden to return the animals to their home. A short time after the earthworm incident, the Morris Goodalls visited the seaside at Cornwall. Valerie-Jane spent the day collecting seashells, which turned out to be yellow sea snails that began crawling all around the house. Van once again explained to Valerie-Jane that the snails would die unless they were returned to the sea. The girl became hysterical with worry, and everyone in the house had to help collect the snails and return them to safety before Valerie-Jane would calm down.